Okay, right. So this is today's communication training. It's going to be on PECS, which stands for Picture Exchange Communication System. So I'll just get my... Just going to remember to close all of my anything that might have anything confidential on the tabs, because I did that the other week and I started recording, then immediately opened up my email, so I had to close the whole thing down and start again. It's very awkward. Right, so we've got we've got a PowerPoint to go through and also got some videos as well to show. Okay, can everyone see that? Yeah. So yes, we talk about PECS. So this is just a warning. So the people who kind of like own PECS essentially are an American company called Pyramid. They're the Pyramid Educational Consultants, and they are very, very strict. And kind of in my old job, when I contacted them about like, what kind of level of PECS training can I give people? And they basically said, you're not allowed to do any PECS training at all. Everyone has to pay the hundreds of pounds to go on the official Pyramid Educational Consultants training, which obviously for most, when I was sort of training, colleagues and schools, that's just not feasible. So basically they said that you can kind of do like PECS overview training, but you have to make it abundantly clear that people aren't having official PECS training. So just going to put that in there. And if you did want to go on PECS training, yeah, you can. There's loads and loads of courses going on all the time that are run by Pyramid, but they are very expensive. So today we're going to look at what it is, when PECS is used, what it's not, the kind of background to using PECS, phases of PECS, and what the next steps are, or other strategies that you can use around PECS. And also I'm going to put in there as well like a little bit of a critique of PECS as well, because PECS is going a bit out of date. It's kind of going out of fashion at the moment, so we can kind of talk about that. Then I've got a quiz at the end. So when we talk about PECS, PECS is an acronym. So there's no such thing as, PECSing that you hear people say, and you often hear sort of basically anything that has symbols in often gets referred to as PECS, or people might call, like if they see someone using a symbol, they might say, oh, that's, or they're using PECS, whereas that's not the case. It's only PECS if the child is using symbols in a picture exchange communication system. So we'll go on to kind of clarify exactly what that is. But yeah, there's often PECS is used to refer to too many things, but it actually is this only one very specific type of communication system. So PECS teaches intentional communication, and we'll come on to what intentional communication is in a bit. And it involves, so communication involves exchanging a message. So right now I'm kind of exchanging a message with you guys. So I've had a thought in my head and I want you guys to have the same thought in your head. So I'm turning my thought into a kind of physical sound waves that you're picking up, and now you've got that thought in your head. And so for children with learning disability or autism, that kind of the kind of natural instinct of how communication works, where you exchange ideas with people, it just doesn't come naturally in some cases, or it's very difficult to kind of work out. So PECS, instead of it being a sort of intangible, abstract bit of sound that gets transferred between people, they use a symbol that gets transferred and really shows really directly and concretely to that child or that person that they are exchanging a message with another person. And because you've got to physically put a symbol in someone's hand, it really reinforces the idea that a message has to go to a person. Because often you get children with autism who might kind of stand at the fridge going milk, 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 or they might sort of be going, oh, and Charlie needs to go to the toilet, but they've got, they're just sort of saying it while they're playing. They don't realise, to get my message across, I need to find a person and tell a person about this, or, and not address the fridge. I need to address somebody else who's going to open the fridge for me. So again, PECS is a really good concrete way of helping that child realise, to get my point across, I've got to find a person. Connecting with another person is the key to communication. So these are some pictures of what a PECS book might look like, or what PECS looks like in action. So these two pictures here, that's your classic PECS book. that you can buy from PECS, and they are really good. They're basically just a little A5 folder, and inside there's lots of different pages, and then the back page is slightly longer than the front page, and there's a sentence strip that sticks onto it. And you can see in the top picture there's a boy who's made a little sentence, and he's exchanged it, and he's pointing and he's reading them out, but we'll kind of see how that goes. But this is classically what a PECS book looks like. So we use PECS when a child, there's often confusion about when children are ready or they're not ready for PECS. And the main criteria is that they are starting to demonstrate a preference of any kind. So it shows that the child, if you know, they kind of really want the orange, but if they're given the apple, they'll kind of show, no, that's not what I wanted, or they might be reaching, they might be bringing objects to adults or pulling adults by the hand to an object to kind of show like that is the thing that I want, but I've no idea really how to convey what I'm saying. So it's not necessarily for non-verbal children. So like I said, it could be children who are actually using lots of words or Makaton signs, but they haven't quite made that connection to intentional communication yet, because they're not realizing they need to direct that communication towards a partner. And also children don't need symbolic understanding. So, you know, often you might give a teacher a whole you know, a communication book or, you know, a PECS book that's full of symbols. And they say, oh, well, they don't understand any of those symbols yet. And the theory is the same as spoken language learning. Like I think I've said this billions of times, but you don't kind of speak to a newborn baby on the first day they're born and say, hello, you know, are you a talker? And then when they don't respond back to you, you don't say, oh, well, they don't understand spoken words. It's the same thing with symbols. Basically, we have to model the symbols to the child and be really, really consistent with them, then they will start to learn them, essentially. And the first 2 phases of PECS don't require any understanding of symbols from the child. The first 2 phases are just the child getting used to exchanging a symbol, and sometimes we even use a blank symbol for that, so it doesn't even matter what's on that symbol. So those are the kind of the criteria for starting PECS, basically. So it's a child who's demonstrating a preference. They've got some communicative intent that's just not quite working, so not intentional yet. They are not necessarily nonverbal. They might be using words and signs, and they don't need to have understanding of symbols. So we've looked at this previously when I talked about total communication. So it's really important to go over what PECS is not. So this is the a kind of visual that shows all the different elements of total communication. So on the top left-hand side, you've got visuals. So that's things that we use to speak to the young person who has learning disability or autism. So that's things like visual timetables to explain what's happening now and next. Objects of reference, a really basic way of helping them to understand what's going to happen. Yeah, and core boards and things like that. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got AAC, which is used for put really simply, it's for the person with learning disability or autism to communicate back with us again. So we've got things like aided language displays, which I harp on about all the time. We've got a thing like high-tech devices. So this is called a VOCA, a voice output communication aid. We've got Makaton signing, and we've got communication books, and we've got PECS. And obviously it's not that black and white, as in visuals they talk to us, and visuals we talk to them, and AAC they talk to us. You know, there's elements of modelling, so it goes back and forth, but that's generally a good way of categorising the 2 things. So that's where PECS fits into the umbrella of communication strategies, basically. So PECS is a type of AAC, alternative and augmentative communication, which is a way for the person with learning disability or autism to communicate back with us again. So that's kind of where it fits in. So just be wary of when, you know, you might be asking education staff or parents about communication strategies, and they might say, oh yeah, they're using PECS, but actually when they get the resources out, it might actually be a visual timetable or an aided language display or a communication book. PECS is quite a separate thing. Okay, so just thinking about, so I talked about intentional communication, and this is just a really, really good infographic, I think, just to talk about the kind of disorder that happens in learning disability and autism, which has implications for the rest of the child's language and communication development. So just really, really briefly, I know I went through this in the intensive interaction one as well. So, and again, these kind of age brackets here are very, very yeah, they're very loose basically, so don't worry about it. It's not exactly at 5 months, 9 months and 12 months that they kind of move on, you know, the very next day to these stages, but this is just a kind of approximation of these stages. So you've got a newborn baby who's pre-intentional. So pre-intentional means that they are not intending to communicate in any way. So when they smile and laugh, or they cry, or they make faces, it's their caregiver who responds to their involuntary behaviour and turns it into communication. So when a baby cries, the parent will pick them up and go, oh, you know, you're hungry, or are you tired, or do you need your nappy changing? Or if they're gurgling and smiling, they would say, oh yeah, you know, oh, you like this toy, or let's do more of this, or you know, you enjoy being thrown up and down, etc. So the baby isn't meaning to communicate anything yet, but they just react to internal and external stimuli, and which causes behaviour, and then the caregiver interprets that as communication. And then the next stage is that the child is not yet communicating intentionally, but they have just slightly more complex behaviour where they may be anticipating that something fun is going to have, but still it's up to their caregiver to interpret what they're doing when they're sort of like looking at things, or they're kind of getting really excited about things. So for example, a child might know that when their parent opens a toy box, they're going to get the really fun, you know, Mr. Tumble toy out. So when it happens, they're looking really, really excited about it. And the parent again will start to interpret that, oh, you're looking over here, I can see this is what you want, or you know, you're reaching down to get something that's fallen, oh, you want this. So they start to give feedback to slightly more complex pre-intentional communication behaviours. And then around 8 to 12 months, the most important bit of learning that a human will ever learn happens. So it's when a child realises that they can communicate intentionally, that they can do something like make a noise, they can point, they can reach, they can look with their eyes, and it makes somebody else do something. So it's basically what all language and communication is then built on. So that young child has realised, actually, you know, I really want, you know, the Mr. Tumble toy that I can see and it's on a shelf. Rather than just standing here and crying about it because I can't get it, I can make someone else go and get that for me. So I can grab an adult by the hand, I can point to it, I can make noises and draw attention and reach up, and someone will get it for me. And then after that, all of language and communication just flows from there. So the child starts to learn that there's specific words for specific things. They can join them together with their non-verbal communication, and then there's words and ideas, and then from there abstract, you know, kind of more abstract and words and reasoning and that kind of more complex communication. But children who have a learning disability obviously take longer to move through these stages, and they might also be a disorder to these stages. And children with autism especially have real difficulty with that intentional stage because their brain is just wired differently. There's lots and lots of reasons basically why they have difficulty with this, but often they don't fully develop through that intentional stage of communication. They don't, you know, the penny doesn't completely drop in terms of this is how I convey something, or this is how I make a connection with another person, this is how I convey a message to another person. So the child might carry on and start developing words and ideas and even kind of joining sentences together, but you know, that will be the child who asks the fridge for milk, or will just be, you know, reciting a whole episode of Peppa Pig, but actually when they need to go to the toilet they've no idea how to ask to go to the toilet, that kind of thing. So PECS works on the skill of intentional communication. That's what it's working on. Okay, so I'm going to go through now the phases of PECS, but I'm going to do it really, really quickly because obviously I'm not training you guys to go and start carrying out PECS in school with children. But what I'd like you to do is be able to go, you know, to a school or to a home, and and just be able to information gather well about PECS. So to find out, you know, kind of what phase of PECS people are on, just have a basic understanding of maybe when there's some difficulties happening. So maybe parents and school staff are reporting things that don't quite match up maybe with how PECS is supposed to be used. So you can just get an idea of actually this family or this school need a bit more help. So the first phase of PECS is establishing motivators. So all communication is based around motivators, essentially. We never ever communicate unless we are motivated to do so. So a motivator might be something tangible. So it might be, you know, a cup of coffee. So you might ask someone, so say you're busy and you're really motivated because you want a cup of coffee, but you know you can't make it time, you could ask someone else to make you a cup of coffee. Or if there is, you know, a bag of sweets that you can't reach, you're motivated to say to somebody else, oh, can you pass me that bag of sweets? They look really nice. You might be motivated in a social way. So to say, oh, hello, good morning, how are you? Or to say please and thank you, or to make, you know, pleasant small talk, and you get a social reward from that. So your motivator is to be, you know, a social person. Yeah, and there's also just motivators to, you know, just kind of connect with people and that kind of thing. But basically, we never ever communicate unless we're motivated to do so. And a real flaw with implementing PECS and other kinds of AAC really is that we can think of it as a sort of way of making the child perform and do something that looks normal. But really, all communication has to be motivating for the child. If it's not something that they want to do, so for example, if you're working on a phase of PECS and you've got an apple and a banana and you're trying to get the child to exchange a picture with you for the apple and banana, but the child like maybe isn't hungry, doesn't like apples and bananas, the child actually can see everyone else playing out on the trampoline outside and that's what they want to do, it's not going to work because they're just not motivated in that moment. So establishing what a child's motivators are and also being flexible and thinking about the fact that a child's motivators, what they're motivated to ask for and exchange a picture for, might change from week to week, day to day, and even kind of minute to minute, really. So a motivator is, we think of a good motivator as a kind of Goldilocks type element in that child's life. So it's got to be motivating enough for a child to reach for and to protest if it's taken away, and we'll try to persist in getting it back. But the Goldilocks part comes in because we don't want it to be too motivating and we don't want it to be not motivating, basically. So if we think about kind of at basic level, we might be working out what a child is motivated to ask for. So we'll watch them around the class, say, oh, you know, they really like crisps, they love going on the trampoline, they love being pushed on the swing, but the iPad, they go a little bit crazy if they can't get it, and that would maybe be too motivating for them. So you might test, so you might get the crisps out and they see them and they start to reach for them, and then if you maybe take them away or say, oh, you know, I'm going to have a crisp now, or pass the crisps on, would they be a bit annoyed? Would they be a bit like, oh, I can't wait to get those back, and maybe try and reach and get them back? But they're not going to have an absolute meltdown if it's taken away. Motivators are also called reinforcers as well. So you might hear people talking about motivators or reinforcers. And a good way of establishing a motivator is to use a motivator assessment. So you might be able to see on here, I wonder, can anyone tell me, so from looking at this grid that's been maybe filled out by a teacher, where they've tried out 3 motivators, so a flashing ball, a puzzle and an iPad, can anyone tell me what, oh, it even kind of says on there, can anyone tell me what the best motivating object is here?
The ball.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can see the flashing ball, they've even put underneath brackets motivating. So you can see a tick in, yes, they reached for it, they were a bit annoyed when it got taken away, they showed signs of pleasure when they had the ball, so they're kind of really enjoying playing with it. And then do they take it again? So if you take it back off them, maybe say, oh, it's my turn, and then you hold it out again, do they take it again? Is it something that they want to persist in getting? So that's great. And the puzzle, you can see, isn't motivating because there's no reaction, didn't seem interested, weren't bothered when it was taken away, didn't seem to be particularly enjoying it, and they didn't try and take it again when it was taken off. And then you've got the iPad, which, yes, they reached for. When it was taken away, they just got really, really distressed and had a meltdown. Yes, they really enjoy it when they're on the iPad, But in terms of then keeping a consistent kind of back and forth going, if you then offer it to them again, because you've taken it off them once, they might just be on the floor just having an absolute meltdown, and they're too then distressed to engage in kind of any learning and continued communication. So that's a motivator assessment. Let's just think about the fact that all communication has to be for something that the child is motivated by. So often PECS isn't working when the communication partner has failed to establish really what is going to motivate the child to exchange. Okay, so I'm gonna whiz through these phases because I don't want to, because I know that you're not going to be kind of carrying them out with children, but we're going to kind of really briefly go through. Excuse me. So phase one. So again, because it's American, some of the kind of titles are a bit cheesy, but phase one is teach to the reach. And you need, in this situation, you need obviously the pupil, so the child or young person. You need a communication partner. And then for phase one, you need another person. And again, often this can be a downside to PECS in that you need 2 to 1 to carry out the first phase or so. And this person is often called the silent prompter. And again, this is sometimes when schools struggle to carry out phase 1 PECS because, you know, most schools don't have the resources to have 2 to 1. So phase 1 works by you find a motivator, you give the child a free go. So, you know, you give them a bite of the apple, or you give them a raisin, or you give them 1 push on the swing or 1 crisp. And then if your motivator has a natural end, you know, so if they've eaten the raisin and it's gone, you then hold out the bag of raisins to see if they'll go for another one. And then a motivator that doesn't have a natural end, you might say kind of my turn. So if they are playing with a ball, you kind of really gently take it back from them. So obviously we're not kind of snatching and prizing things out of children's hands, but we're trying to keep it as a kind of natural play turn take and see. So my turn, you take it back and then see if they want it back again. So then you teach to the reach. So as the child reaches to get another raisin or reaches to get their ball back, the silent prompter, who's that second adult, will be sat behind them and will use physical modelling. So as the child reaches for the thing, that second adult will take their hand really gently and help them to pick up a symbol and exchange the symbol. And I'm going to show you a video of this because this is really complicated. And then the communication partner names the item, holds up the symbol, and then you just repeat it over and over again. And the idea is to slowly phase out needing that silent prompter. So I'm going to show you a video of this because it's a bit easier to explain. Okay, I'll just load the... Oh, was it gone? There it is. So does anyone have any questions so far?
Naomi, can I just ask, how long does that process usually take around?
Yeah, that's a good question. With some children, it takes minutes, and some children it takes months. So it completely depends on the child's learning level, often how well it's carried out and that kind of thing. PECS recommend that 40 exchanges a day as a minimum are carried out, which sounds like a lot. And I'll go in again, sort of like later on. There is a bit of an overlap with PECS and ABA and that kind of thing, which is kind of one of the reasons why it's kind of going out of fashion. But actually, 40 exchanges a day isn't a huge amount. If you just did it every snack time, every time they wanted to push on the swing, that's it. You know, they've eaten 40 bits of apple or bits of apple or crisps or raisins and so many pushes on the swing. Actually, you've done that amount of exchanges in a day. But yeah, it depends on lots of factors. And with, like I said, with some children, it's literally a couple of exchanges and they've got it and they move. You can get them up to like PECS phase 4 in like one session, whereas some children it's months or years to get to that stage. Okay, so let me know if for any reason you can't hear the audio on this. Oh.
Rubik's Cube. My turn. Bye. My turn. Rubik's Cube. Squishy ball. My turn. Squishy ball. My turn. Squishy ball. My turn.
Okay, so yeah, so was it clear from that video kind of basically how PECS phase 1 is supposed to work?
Yeah.
The aim of phase 1 is to get the child exchanging a symbol, and I didn't want to kind of keep playing that video for too long, but as it goes on, they show how the learner slowly starts to reach and then pick up the symbol on their own, and that's basically the idea of how it would work. They would start to not need that physical prompt, they'd start to pick it up on their own, and they'll get to the point where actually without a prompter they can exchange that symbol over. Okay, so that's teach to the reach. Oh, I won't go through all this bit, but basically phase 1 is achieved when the child doesn't need the silent prompter anymore. They don't need that person to move their hand for them, when they can exchange for a range of different motivators with lots of different people, different locations, and they don't need an open hand prompt anymore. They don't need their communication partner to like hold out their hand ready for their symbol. Okay, so phase 2, really briefly going to go through, is called distance and persistence. And phase 2 is basically teaching intentional communication. It's one of the most important stages that all the rest of the phases of PECS are kind of rely on, and it's the one that gets missed out the most, mainly because people often can't afford to go on PECS training, and and where if you don't have the training, it just looks like you would go straight away to just having almost like a choice board. That kind of feels like, well, that's kind of what we'll just move straight to. But unless you teach these kind of foundation communication skills, often it can kind of fall apart at a different time. But the idea of phase 2 is to get the child to travel, so the jargon word for it is traveling, which is basically them picking up a symbol and moving and finding someone to exchange with, or moving and going, finding their symbol and then exchanging with someone. So it's not all just happening straight in front of them, it's them getting up, traveling around, finding symbols, exchanging with people. Then the second part of it is persisting in getting their point across. So for this one, you sometimes do have to have a silent prompter as well. And at this point as well, the child would have a PECS book. So the rules are that you get a motivator for the child, and you just carry on with phase 1, lots and lots of exchanging. Then you slowly move the communication partner away. So the child has to, you know, first time the child might have to lean slightly, they might have to get slightly up off their chair, then they might have to get up and make a few steps to exchange, then they have to move to the other side of the room. And then you also start to move the PECS book away as well. So the child then has to go all the way to go get a symbol from their PECS book and then travel all the way over to their communication partner. And it just makes it a little bit more realistic in terms of communication. So I'll quickly show you a video for this one. Oh. So there's not many. Let's make sure the sound's on. There we go. There's not many good PECS videos on YouTube. There's a few kind of really old ones that Pyramid have made, but they're not very good. And then there's also lots of videos of people not doing PECS properly, basically. So just be aware when it's just one of those things I would say don't bother looking for videos on YouTube because most of them are incorrect. But I've the ones that I've found that I think are correct and actually kind of follow the rules of PECS, I've put together in like a little playlist, so I can send that out afterwards if you want to kind of re-go over anything. Okay, so this is I think a group of speech therapists, and they're all just demonstrating how phase 2 works.
Scenario: Marianne is the student, Courtney is the communicative partner, and Tony is the physical prompter. They will be demonstrating picture exchange communication, phase 2. The goal of this phase is to teach students to press Marianne. After 10 to 15 seconds, she removes the item. During this phase, the student must travel a greater distance for desired communication. First, the distance is increased between the child and the communicative partner. The picture of the desired item is on the binder, and Courtney is holding the desired item and enticing Marianne. Marianne moves for the desired item, and Tony will cue Marianne to pick up the picture. Marianne will take the picture and put it in the communicative partner's hand. Courtney reinforces Marianne by giving her the item and verbal praise.
You wanted the truck.
The following example shows the student completing the trial independently.
You wanted the truck.
This time, the distance between the picture card and Marianne has increased. The communicative partner should not use verbal prompting, but will still entice. Tony guides Marianne with a physical prompt to the picture card. Marianne takes the picture and puts it in Courtney's hand.
You wanted the truck.
The following example shows the student completing the trial independently. The communicative partner has removed all prompts.
Good job. You wanted the truck.
Okay, so there we go. So that was just a demonstration of how distance works. So I'll go back. So there have to be a motivator, and you slowly move the communication partner away. And then the next time you move the PECS book away. And in that video, the next bit would be, so the child has to go all the way over to their PECS book, they have to travel to it, then they have to go all the way to a communication partner to get what they want. It just makes it more realistic and helps the child to kind of see the value in communication, basically, and generalize their skills. The next part of phase 2 is persistence. And this is when a communication partner pretends to be busy and looks away, because obviously whenever we communicate with people, we're never communicating with someone who's literally sat in front of us, you know, looking at us, waiting for us to say something. You know, we have to say, oh, excuse me, can I just get this from you? Or like, hello, how are you? You know, you have to make a starter and then exchange your communication message. So again, it just makes it starts to generalize skills to more like real life. And there are no videos of this on YouTube because it gets forgotten so often. But again, it's one of the most important parts. So basically, you like a swivelly chair is often really useful for doing it. So you would use, so it's often called enticing. So for example, if the child really liked crisps, you would have the communication partner with a bag of crisps, and they'd maybe open it and rustle it and go, yum, look at this, and really entice the child. And then the child would think, oh, brilliant, I'll go and get a crisp. So they'd pick up their crisp and ball, they'd take it over, and the communication partner, you know, just leaves a little bit of a delay before they respond to them to get the child used to the idea that you've actually sometimes got to persist in getting. So ideally, we want to aim for the child, you know, being in a busy classroom, thinking, you know, I need the toilet, or I want to put my coat on and go outside. I'm going to ask my teacher, and the teacher might be really, really busy and be speaking to other children, or might be not paying attention. And we want the child to have that skill of persisting in communicating, not just giving up straight away, and finding skills like tapping someone or saying hello or drawing attention to be able to exchange their message. So that's phase 2. So it's achieved when they're able to travel, when there's a distance between them and their communication partner and or their symbol, and they're able to persist in exchanging a symbol with a communication partner who's looking away and not paying attention to them. Okay, so phase 3, oh dear, is really, really complicated. So there's phase 3A and phase 3B, which I'm not going to go through with you, but I will send you, there's quite a good handout afterwards that that these little kind of grids are taken from. That is a good sort of checkbox way of moving through the phases. So I'll send that out just so it's maybe something you could refer to. Obviously, if you've got any PECS questions, you can just ask me, but it's quite a nice way of looking at all the different phases. So really, really briefly, phase 3 is divided into 2 because there's a phase where, so phase 3 is discrimination. It's similar to when a 12 to 18-month-old is starting to learn that there's specific words for specific things. So up to that stage, a child might just make vocalizations and they might use different intonation and that kind of thing, but they're just kind of making noises for things. You know, they're pointing, they're going to ask for something. Whereas between the age of 12 to 18, they're starting to realise, like, if I say mum, 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 my mum looks at me, and if I say da, 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 my dad looks at me. Oh, maybe these noises mean different things. And of course, they're hearing words day in, day out, so they're starting to kind of, that feedback loop is working. So phase 3A is a similar stage. So rather than just, I'm going to exchange a symbol and get the thing that I want, the child starts to learn, if I exchange this one, I get crisps. And if I get, this one, if I exchange that one, I get an orange. And the phases, the 2 halves of phase 3, one is helping the child to understand this. So I'll just stop. So yeah, so one is kind of developing that understanding in the child that there's a difference between 2 different pictures. So what you would do is you'd have a motivator versus a non-motivator. So for example, the classic one is crisps that they might be motivated by, and then the non-motivator would be something like a piece of paper or a sock. Of course, some children are motivated by paper because they like to flap paper, etc. So you'd need to make sure, you'd need to do your motivator assessment to find out what's not motivating. So for the child that we looked at, for the example of the motivator assessment, maybe it would be the puzzle that you'd use as the non-motivating thing. So basically, you'd start doing exchanges, and instead of there just being one symbol, there'd be 2. Excuse me. And then if they pick up the crisps, they get the crisp, and that was the thing they were looking at, that they're motivated by, that they wanted. But if they accidentally pick up this one, they get the paper, and it starts to trigger the child to think, like, why is it that I got the paper this time? I don't want this. They try again, and then they start to realise, oh, hang on, when I exchange this one, I get the thing that I want. When I exchange this one, I don't get the thing that I want. And then you start, you know, swapping them around on the page and seeing if they can start to realise, oh, I need to look for that symbol every time, and that's how I get the thing that I want. And then the second half of phase 3 is phase 3B, is where you have 2 equally motivating things. So the child might be equally motivated by crisps and an orange. And actually, if you miss out the first part, the motivating and non-motivating, you could get to a point where you've got lots of symbols on the child's textbook at snack time, and actually the child isn't knowing what the difference is between the pictures. They're just picking one up, handing it over, and they're like, oh, great, I got an orange, or great, I got on squash this time, or I got crisps. Because they like all of the things, they're all equally motivating. Like, they're not really learning the difference between them. So there's a particular kind of strategy that you use called error correction, which I won't go into now, but I'll send you the video of afterwards if you're interested in looking at it. And it's basically a way of, you essentially have like a tray or something. So for example, I've got an orange and an apple here. So the child exchanges with you. So the child gives me the orange, and instead of just giving them the orange, I would say, go on then, take it. And then if they chose the apple, that would show me, oh, they've given me the orange picture, but actually they thought they were asking for the apple. I need to start that again. And there's a particular error correction method that goes through. The true, you know, carrying out all the proper phases of PECS, to actually go and see that happen in a special school, let alone a home, is quite rare. Me and Rachel saw a special school teacher in Mayfield the other day doing phase 3B error correction, and I nearly fell off my chair. I couldn't believe that I was actually seeing someone carry it out correctly. So so just so you're aware that the kind of official PECS way of doing things is really, really strict, and it's all based on kind of the behavioural approach and behavioural theory and that kind of thing. yeah, I'm not going to go into like all the details of it basically. But I will send out resources afterwards if anyone's interested in kind of reading it through, and I've got some videos of the different phases and that kind of thing. Okay, so these little phases. Oh yeah, and just really quickly, there's also phase 4 after phase 3. So actually, PECS goes all the way up to phase 8, I think. But in kind of my professional opinion, and generally really in speech therapy, we only really tend to go up to phase 4. So phase 4 is the child has a sentence strip. So the idea is that you would have I want plus bubbles and all sorts of other things. There you go, on their communication book. And ideally, you want all those things in their communication book. Where a child has achieved phase 3, when they can go all the way through their book and find different things and then exchange them. So kind of like building it to a communication book. But phase 4 would be, so for example, I'm just going to put them on the front. The child makes a sentence with an I want symbol, and then they would choose bubbles, and they take the sentence strip off, and then they hand it over to somebody, and then the teacher or the communication partner would go, okay, and then help them to say the sentence, I want bubbles, and then they would hand them the bubbles. That's how phase 4 works. And then phase 5, 6, 7, and 8 work up to things like commenting and saying things like I can see, I can hear, I can feel, all these different things. But really, once it gets past that stage, it's far, far more useful to move on to a communication book. So that's obviously a different part of AAC. And I'll come on to this in a second as well, that really the PECS approach on its own is not really that useful, because it's only really for requesting. And there's so many other reasons why we communicate with people. So that's a basic overview of the 4 phases of PECS, and with the motivator phase stuck on the beginning as well. So those are the 4 stages. And I'm going to quickly go to, here we go. So some other kind of things that we need to consider at the same time as PECS, basically. So when we think about moving on, I would always recommend that children are using aided language displays alongside PECS. So aided language displays, I'm not sure, can you see my image on the screen? I think you can, can't you? Yeah. So I always have one on the back of my clipboard, and I've gone through aided language displays before, and there's lots and lots on the common drive, and if you need any, please let me know. There's lots printed out in the office as well. So an aided language display has lots and lots of core vocabulary on it, which can be used for lots of different communicative functions. So there is I want to request things, but there's also things like look at this. You know, you could ask what's next. I like that. So commenting on things. Saying when something's wrong, say, you know, that hurts. Protesting, saying no, stop, or that's finished. Asking for help. Talking about time, asking questions. There's lots and lots of other reasons why we communicate, and PECS can be quite limiting. So I would always have PECS on the go, but also an aided language display alongside that's being used in lots of different situations. And then once you get to phase 4, I would always recommend that children start using a communication book, which is basically a big book of aided language displays with lots more vocabulary in. So there's lots of different communicative functions that a child can use, and it really extends their communication. And the idea really is that a child, once they've got to PECS phase 4, they have, at least to some extent, they've started to understand that intentional communication, that PECS was there to teach them in the first place. And after that, you can go to something that's a bit more flexible, like a communication book. I have had some children in the past, children who are generally autistic and have lots of impairment in that third area of the triad, that restrictive and repetitive behaviours. So children who are incredibly rigid in their learning, and for whom communication does not come in any way naturally, and they need to learn it through these really sort of behavioural steps. So in the past, I've had maybe 1 or 2 children who I've recommended to then carry on up the phases of PECS, because I thought they maybe couldn't cope with the more flexible communication book phase. Okay, so the downside of PECS, like I said, PECS is starting to go out of fashion really, mainly because it's associated with the behavioural approach and has links with ABA. So it's based on the same principles as ABA, and ABA, particularly in autism circles, is really vilified. People really hate ABA. So so really anything that's kind of associated with it is starting to go out of fashion. So like I said, there's limited communicative functions. If you used it really properly and everyone in the child's network all went on PECS training and that kind of stuff, there are more communicative functions. There's things like asking for breaks, asking for help, wait symbols and all this kind of stuff. But kind of at the coalface, when you're in kind of special schools, you very rarely see that seen. And unfortunately, PECS is often restricted to just snack time. So it's almost like an activity that happens at snack time, and there's no generalization of the skills that happen to the rest of the day or to other types of activities and motivators, which is a real shame. So yeah, PECS, when it's not seen as part of the big umbrella of communication strategies, all those visuals, all the different types of AAC, it can become quite limiting. Also in Birmingham, unfortunately, because there's so many different speech therapists, because there's so many different special schools who all have different funding streams and all have their own little bubbles of the way they do things, and also because the pyramid training is so expensive, and also because phases 1 and 2 are quite labour intensive, you need a lot of staff for them, that you need a lot of training to get them working properly. Quite a few settings have started to develop their own version of PECS, which basically I would say if you're not going to do PECS, don't do it at all and just do aided language displays and communication books. Because really, if you're going to do PECS but miss out phases 1 and 2, you're not really teaching intentional communication and you're setting yourself up for a disaster later on. So we've got all sorts of different acronyms across Birmingham. So there's POTS, which is Picture and Object Transfer System, that Ufcombe and Hamilton tend to use. And there's, what's this one? There's COPE. Is it Cherry Orchard Picture Exchange? And then VEX, I think, is Victoria Exchange Communication System. So there's ones at different schools have even like named after themselves and things. It's essentially the kind of thing that if pyramid educational consultants got wind of, they'd be very angry about it. But yeah, so unfortunately, just because of lack of resources across Birmingham, I'm not kind of blaming anyone for doing this. Lots of schools have found their own sort of cheaper and easier way of implementing PECS. But essentially, I mean, in my opinion, I would say either do PECS or don't do it at all, and you get into kind of a bit of a messy situation, particularly, as I've said, with kind of Ufcombe and Hamilton have systems that are so different to anybody else. They start to get kind of impossible to generalise to other settings, which really is a complete waste of time. That would be like, a child living in France but only ever going to a German-speaking school, and then they can't get a job afterwards because they can't speak French, So yeah, so that is the downside of PECS basically. So limited communicative functions, because generally it's used only for requesting. It's based on a behavioural approach, has links to ABA, so that's why it tends to go out of fashion. And because it's based on the premise that you have to kind of withdraw, take something away from a child to entice them to communicate, and that's seen as, if in bad practice, that could be quite abusive. And even now, just the general idea of teaching children in that manner is again kind of going out of fashion. And then also really inconsistent use across settings, particularly in Birmingham, which is a real shame. So I'm going to do a quiz now. So if everyone who can unmute themselves or go on the chat. And basically, these are just pictures, and I want you to say if it's PECS or if it's not PECS. And actually, first of all, I'm just going to check if there's any comments or questions at the moment. Has anyone got anything they need to ask? Okay. Does that kind of tally in with what people have seen in schools and homes and how PECS is being used, or?
Yeah.
Brill. Okay then, so it kind of tallies in. Brill. Okay, so yeah, this is the last thing we're going to do, and it's a quick quiz. So, yeah. Okay, so I want you to tell me, is this PECS or is it not PECS? What do people think?
PECS.
Yes, you're right. So yeah, this is kind of what a classic pyramid consultant PECS book looks like that you can buy off their website. And this is a child who's obviously at PECS phase 4. They've made a symbol, they've exchanged it, and their communication partner is holding it up for them so they can say the sentence. And you can also see that it's PECS because their communication partner is kind of has control over the motivator. So their communication partner is holding the item, so there's a reason for the child to keep asking. Kind of a flaw that often happens is the communication partner just gives, you know, the whole bowl of crisps to the child and they just sit and scoff the lot. Whereas actually you could get more communication if you keep taking it back again and giving them a reason to keep asking. Okay, what do you think, PECS or not PECS?
Oh, it doesn't look like PECS symbols, but I don't know. It's not PECS board, isn't it? So yeah, it could be PECS.
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, is anyone else?
Yeah, I was going to say, is it PECS?
Yeah, you're right. And also the type of symbol. So there's lots of different symbol systems. There's one called, there's the widget, which is the communicating print ones. There's board maker. There's symbol sticks. And then, of course, Ofcom and Hamilton have their own symbols that they use. So there's lots of different symbol systems. So PECS doesn't rely on a particular type of symbol.
Oh, cool.
So they can look quite different. But you can see this is PECS because, yeah, it's often kind of Velcro is the giveaway because it's obviously something that's designed to be taken off and exchanged. And you can see the sentence stripping across the bottom as well. So this is a child who is on kind of one of the higher phases because they're using adjectives. So I want green lollipop, or that even might be I have. So yeah, that's one of the higher stages. But again, I would not teach that through PECS. I'd just teach it through modelling on a communication book. But yeah, so this is PECS because it's got Velcro and it's the classic PECS book as well. And there's a sentence strip. PECS or not PECS?
Not PECS.
Not PECS. Is it aided language display?
Visual.
Oh, brilliant. Well done, everyone. Yeah, this is an aided language display. And this one is, these are board maker symbols actually. So yeah, they're just a different kind of symbol system. But again, it doesn't matter what type of symbols you use. But yeah, this is an aided language display. And as you can see, there's loads of core vocabulary on it, which is really nice. The kind of pronouns, all the different communicative functions, things like want, help, asking questions, have, give, like, put, eat, lots of stuff like that. Okay, so PECS or not PECS?
PECS.
Brilliant, yeah, so this is PECS. And you can tell basically because it's got Velcro. So this will be inside a child's PECS book. This will be one of the pages of their PECS book. And it looks like it's a general page of kind of, you know, play items that they like to play with and ask for. So these are the child's different motivators. Okay, PECS or not PECS?
Not PECS.
No. Does anyone know what this is?
Communication.
Exactly, yeah, it's a communication book. So this is one of the ACE Centre style communication books that's designed by a lady called Claire Latham. And in this book, the page on the left will always be the same. It will always have the same core vocabulary. Then the page on the right will have the fringe or topic vocabulary. So you can see on this page it's drinks, and you can see the little tabs on the side. There's things like play items, spelling, numbers, actions, all those sorts of things. So yeah, this is a communication book, and this is where I would recommend children move to after they've achieved phase 4 PECS. So PECS or not PECS?
Not PECS.
No, so this isn't PECS either, and this is actually a POD book. So POD stands for Pragmatic Organisation Dynamic Display. So POD book is just a slightly more complicated way of using a communication book, but the idea is it promotes lots of social skills and things like that. So you might come across kids who have POD books. But yeah, as you can see, they're all pictures. There's nothing, the access method is pointing, it's not exchanging. You're not taking any pictures off and exchanging. Yeah, a POD book has some core vocabulary down the side, but is a bit more complicated in the way you sort of navigate back and forth through the pages. So PECS or not PECS?
Not PECS.
No. Does anyone know what it is instead?
No. Is it a bit of aid? Well, I don't know.
Is it a bit like the one page is, forgot what the word is now. I've got one in my bag that you gave.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is just another design for an aided language display with slightly different layout and core vocabulary. And I think this is being done alongside the game. Real. Okay, PECS or not PECS?
Not PECS. Aided
No,
language display.
Exactly, it's an aided language display. PECS or not PECS?
Not PECS.
Oh,
No.
I
And
don't know
this-
because
it's so difficult, this one, because they go through it, don't it? Like,
yeah, so they choose
language
what
display.
activity or whatever they want from that little key ring.
Exactly. So yeah, this is
a
funny
PEC
one.
as well.
Yeah, so hang on, have I got? I'm sure I've got one of these, but I actually end up never using. No,
I've seen quite a few support staff using these rather than the actual folders.
They are used a lot actually, and they are good because it's basically just having some symbols to hand. So often you see them on on teachers' lanyards and things like that, and they're often used both as a visual and as AAC. So you'll often see teachers who find, you know, the toilet symbol or the go outside to play or the snack symbol to hold it up to show children, like, this is what's happening now. Or potentially maybe, you know, if a child's a bit distressed, you can point to it to say, you know, classroom, let's go back to classroom, to help focus them and think about what's happening. But then also you see children who go up to their teachers fob and go all the way through to find something that they want, which is really lovely. And obviously any kind of communication attempts we will always honour and kind of go with. But a child who's at that stage should, you know, the fact that they can look through, they know the symbol that they've got in mind, and they've got that, you know, they're travelling if they're doing that, and really that child should have at least an aided language display or a communication book so they of their own that they can go through the symbols for. So yeah, so this is often called just like a symbol fob that teachers often have in school, but it's not picture exchange communication because the child isn't sort of taking out and exchanging with a teacher.
So can they use these, sorry Naomi, without any kind of training? Are they able to just use those? Like, so maybe a parent in the home could use these, or would they need to have
necessarily? No, I mean, yeah, I'd say using a visual of any kind is always really, really useful. So, and it's also kind of up to parents. If parents would find a fob that's just easy to have in their pocket or on a lanyard around their neck, and generally it would really be used as a visual, as a way of the communication partner communicating with the child or young person with learning disability and autism. It would be a way of, you know, kind of holding up a symbol to say, this is what's happening now, more of a kind of visual timetable type thing, just to say, you know, now it's time to wash our hands, now it's time to go to the toilet, now it's time to do this. And yeah, having it on a key ring might be a way that the parent or carer finds it useful to use. But generally, I would say, you know, having a visual timetable or using an aided language display, at least alongside it, would be good. Because, again, with an aided language display, you've got all the core stuff as well. You've got the kind of, you know, next we're going to wash our hands, or washing hands as finished, or, you know, look, I'm washing my hands, you know, those sorts of things. So you can kind of extend language. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with using symbols on a fob. They're quite a neat way of doing things, but it shouldn't be the only way that a child has to communicate. Well, yeah, so we're nearly finished, but PECS or not PECS?
PECS.
PECS.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Look at the things that are on here. What else do you think it could be?
Visual display.
Yeah, so this is actually, yeah, absolutely. This is a visual timetable.
Really? But they can take it off, can't they, and then exchange it? So would it?
That kind of now and next board then? Is that the kind of?
So yeah, so a visual timetable. So this is a visual timetable. Sometimes you get them that go from left to right, but you often get them that go from top to bottom as well, which is quite a useful way of doing it. And the reason why you have them on Velcro is so that, you know, it's nice and flexible to use. You can have a big bag of symbols. You can make a new one each day for whatever's happening. But also the idea is that so the one on the left is you know, wash your face, go to the toilet, get dressed, have your breakfast and brush your teeth. The child can, it helps their concentration if, you know, once they've washed their face, you can say, okay, washing your face is finished, and the child would learn to take that off and put it in a finished box.
Oh, yeah.
So then the child can always orient themselves to what's happening in the day, because they can go back. The first thing on there is toilet, because they've already done washing, and after they've gone to the toilet, they put that in the finished box. So yeah, this can get a bit messy, because sometimes this ends up being used as a way of the child asking for things, but also it's also a visual timetable, and it should be very separate. You should, you know, if a child is using PECS, they should have a folder with the symbols that they use to ask for things and communicate about things, and then a whole separate thing with a folder for their visual timetable. So yeah, those two things should be kept very separate, and because they often look similar and they sometimes have similar symbols on them, they can get a bit confused and a bit mixed up. So this is a really important difference. One is a visual timetable and the other is picture exchange communication. Okay, I think we're nearly finished. Let's move right to the end. Ah, yeah, there we go. No, you know all of those. Brilliant. Great. So does anyone have any questions at all? Cool. Brilliant. So yeah, so basically what I wanted to kind of go through was just that concept of the fact that PECS is often overused to label all sorts of different communication stuff. And I just wanted you to have a better idea of exactly, you know, if a parent or a teacher says, oh yeah, they're using PECS, really what is it that PECS really means? Do you know what I mean? That it's not just sort of a word for everything that vaguely involves symbols, that it's actually a very specific strategy that's being used where symbols are exchanged for objects. Okay, right then. So I've got, I'm just going to try and find it. I'm going to stop recording there.